thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. And when I came across your work, I thought it was really cool. And I haven't seen a story like yours. So, yeah, I
Mm,
guess could you just want to start off by like telling us a little bit about your story?
yeah. So when I think about my story specifically for this conversation, I think of, um, I'd been an artist in different forms, mostly as a poet and as a musician, throughout the early parts of 2010s and leading up into 2014, 2015. I was starting to, really work into projects and like develop that craft and step into being a performer. Um, and so that intersected with a very, very difficult time in my life. I'd experienced um, different forms of depression over that decade, but um, it then evolved into bipolar disorder and manic and psychotic symptoms. Um, and there was a very long episode of mania and psychosis between January 2015 and April of 2015, just sustained the whole time and escalating. And that led to a my life kind of going one way and then quickly stopping and then having to pivot a very different way in my life. Um, and so I think maybe the short version of this, just to start off, is that I went through a very difficult time with my mental health and mental illnesses, diagnosis, um, learning to embrace it, move through it, and heal with it, and largely due to music, community, um, like getting in touch with my culture, like and also moving through psychiatry and that kind of support. So I feel like different modes of healing not only got me to a place where I feel like I could live my life again, um, but also we're here having this conversation, what, 5 years, 6 years later, and I'm in a very, very different place, in a place that I quite honestly couldn't have dreamed of. Um, there have been very different um, sort of milestones and things along the way, but I think that's the key version of it. Hmm.
Nice. And
Yeah.
that's really interesting. And I guess how has your relationship with music changed after getting your diagnosis?
Mm, I think after getting my diagnosis, music was kind of like three things for me. First was it was a place of like deep joy. It was a place of um, feeling the most at home. It was like the inner child in me just always active and um, being engaged with. I think that's one. It was like this like I'm realizing more and more now even that music isn't simply entertainment for me. Music is wrapped up in that as play, but also like deep, deep work, and also ways of connecting with myself and the community around me and the world around me. Um, I attribute music to be, equally as important as the counseling sessions I used to attend, as important as the medications that I like learned to take and I'm still taking. Um, I think being able to make music in the height of my most ill and now has shown me the effects that it has to keep me grounded. Uh, and in that, especially in the like communicating through music and communicating through lyrics, has helped me process my feelings, my traumas, my experiences. Um, it's helped me communicate it to other people, whether it's like finding really specific words that help me translate my experience to people, or it's being like, these chords make me feel this way. Uh, this is how I'm going to communicate it to you because no words can actually do that. Um, yeah, and I think the last piece is that again beyond survival, which is what those two things touch on. Beyond survival, um, music is really music in all its forms and all the different ways to engage with it um, is kind of what keeps me going through the days. Like if I'll wake up and there's music somehow a part of that day, that's a good day to be awake. Um, my life, my work, and my play are all music now, and that's a very different place than 2 years ago, even like 5 years ago. So I feel very grateful to be living on this path now. It's just taken quite a long time to get here. Yeah.
That's really inspirational, and the way that you put
Mm,
that, like, is really well said. So,
mm.
being a Filipino Canadian artist, how has your mental health been perceived by your community and your family?
Hmm. Yeah. My experiences discussing, sharing topics around mental health throughout childhood and my teenage years, it like there wasn't really conversation around it. It was just like there were countless instances where I just knew something was off. Like I don't feel good today, and or yeah, I feel sick, but I don't know how to describe it. And oftentimes, it would it would be like, what are you talking about? You're making it up, or like, or there are worse problems than that, or um you're probably just like sad, like in the moment you're like dealing with a short term thing. um I remember there were even times where I'd have to be like, I'd lie and I'd be like, yeah, I think I just like I have food poisoning, or like, I'd like make up like a easier to understand like illness, like a sickness or something, um so that I could just like be horizontal for the whole day. um I also think I also think in my family, like, there's there's elements of like, because I was raised Catholic, um, and the sentiment of like just pray it away, like just pray it away without like other practices or rituals to kind of like help you through that time. I It was quite harmful. Like, I it didn't get better. Um, and I think the other piece is that now, especially uh, in that time of crisis between 2015 and 2016, um, you know, it's like it, it it became very apparent that this was a really serious. It had to become extreme for it to be taken seriously. I was hospitalized. I stayed in a psychiatric ward for a month. Um, you know, uh, my life was totally thrown off course. Um, and it wasn't until my family saw that and saw the wreckage basically of that time, that they were like, oh, maybe he's not just sad. Like, maybe this isn't something that you can just simply pray away. Maybe there's other things happening here. Um and I'd say that middle of that decade was probably the clearest pivot or clearest moment where like the guards dropped or something, and it was less about combating my experience of myself and more being like asking questions and like learning to take care and learning to support, and me learning to trust them, that they can learn, and that they are open to, not just open to, but like really wanting to support, just that they don't know how, and that isn't their fault. Like, that's not a personal or individual fault. That's also systemic. That's also generational. That's also colonial. Um, and knowing that uh, individual lack isn't a personal fault, and it's also just a product of the systems that we live in, kind of helped us come together and be like, okay, how do we learn to take care of this together? And it wasn't like me blaming or them blaming. So I'd say, I think in summary, like, the decades was the last decade was a very transformative time, for my family, in relation to our understanding and like willingness to discuss mental health. Hmm.
That was amazing. I'm glad I asked the question. Um, so much of your work seems to be centered on the ideas of like connection, creation, collaboration. So
Mm.
why are these ideas important to you in creating art?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, if I answer that first from like
Mhm.
my individual like just experience is like I honestly I feel like I'm quite like sensitive. Like I when there's like negative or harmful energy around me, it's like it like takes a toll on me. And part of that might be around the bipolar disorder, but I also think that's just part of me as a person. Um and so kind of pun intended, like I kind of need to harmonize the world around me, like the immediate space around me. Um so that I can feel good. Um if I feel tension or like dissonance, I'm not in a good place. Like it's like I'm like a ball of anxiety. Like I don't want to talk to anybody, and I can barely, you know, like move through the day, let alone socialize. Um, so at its core, for me, like that's just something that I do to stay alive. Like I have to connect with people. I have to collaborate. Collaborating to me is one of the most intimate and sacred forms of connection. You're literally co-creating a reality together. Like how beautiful is that? you know and to do that with like my loved ones and like my peers and my community, like that's I don't know a better way to move through my day. And maybe, and so outside of me and outside of my sphere, like I think the world uh in ways is becoming less and less connected uh to, yeah, ironically, like connected to humanity, like our shared humanity and our individual humanities. And um at this point, music is, again, like I said, like less entertainment and more like a way to string together realities and string together our string together people, um especially during times when we might feel fractured, and fractious. um and And maybe on like a less serious answer, it's just more fun. It's just more fun with people. Like last night, so that show that I played last night, it was supposed to be just me and my guitarist. And then throughout the last couple weeks, my friend, she joined in. She's like, I want to come. I'll be there. I'm gonna be there anyways. I'll sing with you. And then the next week, my other friend joined, and she's like, wait, I want to come too. And then so there was gonna be four of us in the band. And then the lineup last night had three acts on it. Funny thing, the other two acts were our friends. So by the end of the night, we're closing, like my set is closing the lineup, and for the last song, we all sang together, and this was totally spur of the moment. Like this was not planned, and but that's like the kind of magic that like it's like as soon as we stepped into the building together, we're like, this night is already amazing. Anything beyond this is like is extra. But the fact that we all get to connect and make music together, if there was no one in that room, the six of us would have an amazing time. But again, like nothing lights me up like co-creating with people, especially when it's music.
Mm.
Mhm.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Just like being able to sing
It
with
was,
your friends.
it was so fun. I'll send you a little clip or something. I'll
Yeah,
email it to you.
please
Yeah,
do.
it was really cool.
Okay, nice.
Mhm.
So did you explain or can you explain like how you found the motivation to go back to work or exercise or even make music again after your
Mm.
attempt at suicide?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that time from January 2015 to April of 2016, kind of a blur, honestly.
Mm.
Um, I was reeling from like the heightened mania and psychosis. My brain was just so taxed, like just so tired. Like all of my being was just tired. And um because there's so much overwhelm, there was so many things to deal with and to process and to face. Um I kind of just shut down for like I guess it's a year and a half almost. And by on the when I woke up after the attempted suicide, um, I I was first I was like, oh, I guess I'm still here. Like that didn't that didn't do anything. You know, that didn't solve my problems. Like that didn't whatever. And to what it to this day, what it feels like that day feels like a wall was placed behind my back. Like I can't go back there. Like there's no I can't I have to move forward. Like
Mm.
where else am I gonna go? You know? So it really felt like I had no other option but to take the next step. And so, you know, I also understand that like traumas don't get processed and problems don't get solved in a day, right? I can't be like, and now I'm good and like and I'm gonna fix everything. But what I do know is that on that day, this like commitment to taking it one step at a time was like it just ingrained itself in me. I'm like, if I can't leave this reality, I'm just gonna go move forward, and I'll do it one step at a time. Wherever I go is wherever I go, but I have to go this way. Um, and in that was the constant check in every single day. Every time I wanted to give up, every time every time I went into suicidal ideation, the self talk eventually would come back to believe in yourself one more day. That's just take that next step. And in 2016, I was jobless. I was like tens of thousands of dollars in debt from my mania. Um, I still had one course left in my university degree, which is like super stressful. Um, I, you know, more or less was alone, save for my immediate family, and life looked way different than like whatever people know and see of me now. I always say like imagine the complete opposite and worse. Um, and I think the motivation to that kept me going back to work, back to play, back to building a life that I want to live in is that I was just curious about what I could create. Whether that's whether that's music or whether that's a relationship, whether that's like a new idea, whether that's like having an impact on the world around me or the world at large. Like I was, you know, I bring up that like I bring up that sort of not the nothingness of that time because I got to prove to myself that the daily work could lead to change. The daily work could lead to improvement. And as long as I committed to the daily work, I'd be better off than I was yesterday. Mhm.
And how does it feel, I guess, to talk openly about having the bipolar disorder and your experience with mental health? Like, has that helped your healing process at all?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Yeah, how does it feel like talking openly about your
Uh,
bipolar disorder, and has that helped your healing process?
yes. It's helped because at some point in that process, in that journey, I realized that it didn't feel good to not talk about it.
Mm.
It just it had to be out loud. And in my family, like in our culture, like there's so much shame wrapped up in that. Like so much shame, not in even just the living with mental illness, but in all of those side of like all the consequences of that period. Like, I don't have a job, I haven't finished my degree, I'm in debt. You know what I mean? There's like layers on layers. I'm like living with my family again. There's just like layers and layers of like
Yeah.
things that like I could feel and like I was experiencing from other people that were judgment and shame and guilt, and it quieted me. Like it was all here. And when I bring up that thing of like I feel like I'm a quite sensitive or like in touch with the space around me person, that it sucked to feel that tension and that dissonance, right? So I had to put it out. to like change the energy around me. Like I didn't want to step into a space where I wasn't welcome. I didn't want to step into a space where people misunderstood me. I didn't want to step into a space where people were guilting me or shaming me. So rather than swallowing the all that negativity, I decided I'm just gonna put all of it out there. And if it scares someone, if someone feels some kind of way about it that doesn't resonate anymore with our relationship and they want to leave our friendship or our being family members, by all means do it. But if it means that I get to stay alive, I mean,
Yeah.
that's not even a conversation. Like, you know? So yeah, I think part of being spoken um beyond like community and public advocacy, but just like the direct family and friend advocacy. Yeah, I learned that kind of that need to stay alive taught me about boundaries, taught me about stating what I need, taught me about um yeah, learning to communicate um around conflict.
Mhm. Yeah, that family like advocacy is a lot something a lot of people don't talk about. So thank you for sharing that. Like I know that's very
Mm-hmm.
personal.
Yeah.
So what is some advice that you can give others who might be struggling with their diagnosis of the consequences of their illness?
Hmm. I always struggle with this question. Um, I always struggle because I think wrapped up in this is that the way that I healed and and continue my healing might not work for somebody. Like someone could watch this or listen to this and be like, I don't know what he's talking about. Like none of that makes sense. And so maybe what I will pre-answer with is like these are all suggestions and this is my experience. Like take what take what works for you and just leave what doesn't. Um, there is no one way to heal. I think that's the core takeaway. If I were to leave someone with like maybe an affirmation, is that like deep inside my body, like my I think my body is always telling me what it needs. It's always communicating like I feel safe or like I feel in danger or I feel excited, I feel held, I feel at home. Like it's always telling me all these things. And you know, I would be in countless doctors, psychiatrists, counselors rooms, and not all of them would be mindful of this that part of it. That like we know that we know what we need. Um, and sometimes it's a matter of like gently pulling it out and being like, what are we naturally aware of in our needs, in our ways of feeling safe? And so I think I just wanted to invite that into the conversation as well, is like not dismissing the natural and like inherent like wisdom that like our minds and our bodies and our hearts are capable of telling us and are telling us all the time. Um, and so I think that has to be considered when we um, step into different kinds of support services and stuff, um, and that we have more agency in our healing than sometimes we're led to believe.